I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Sarah Spence, I'm glad we're having this conversation today. I know you're the CEO of a major PR firm in Canada, but what I don't understand is what exactly is the name of the firm? Because I see four different names. I see Tadiem, I see Narrative, I see Benson & Byrne, I see One Method. Do you have four different jobs? Is Tadiem the Uber company, or how does this work? And thank you for being on the show with me today, because I know we have a lot to get into.
Yeah, we do. Well, thank you for having me too. I am CEO across Tadiem. Tadiem's our parent company, and Tadiem stands for Talent and Decency in Equal Measure. So it's an acronym, and it is the parent company across three amazing agencies. Benson & Byrne, which is a full-service advertising agency. One Method, which is also an advertising agency, but with a real slant on design, a real focus on design. And Narrative, which is a full-service PR agency. So sometimes internally we talk about BBOMN, Benson & Byrne, One Method, Narrative. But the parent company and the part I lead is Tadiem, which is across all three.
Talent and design, talent and what was it? What was the D in equal measure?
And decency.
Decency.
Yeah.
Who came up with that?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I believe it was, I've just heard this story actually. I believe it was something that, so we have 5 owner operators who are all very involved in the business. And it was something that they had been sort of talking about. But when they incorporated the parent company, they needed a name. And it was actually our CFO who took Talent and Decency in Equal Measure and made it Tadiem. So there you go.
That's good. That is good. So you're in charge of an ad agency, an ad/design firm, and a PR firm. But your background is coming up through the PR side, right? Because you came up through the narrative side, right?
It is. I'm actually this I call myself a funny hybrid in many ways. So yeah, my roots are all in PR and communications. However, I started in PR and communications. I actually started on the corporate side, working for a major telco. And then in my career, I went more into working with tech companies. And while I was working with the tech companies, actually PR became one of my duties, but I did much more sort of broad marketing, which was great because I got a ton more experience doing a whole bunch of different things. And then I went back more deep into the PR area because you can never do enough PR and it's so interesting. It's such a fascinating world. And then now here I am back taking all sort of the marketing expertise that I got earlier in my career and combining it with the PR expertise, because PR, when you think of the world where we are right now, brand and reputation are kind of two sides of the same coin, and we really need to think about things in quite an integrated way. So I think that my experience is kind of, it's all come full circle in a way that makes a ton of sense in terms of how I think about these three companies and the services that we do for our clients.
It makes a ton of sense to be able to answer the tough questions, especially the last couple of months, right? We scheduled this a couple of months ago to do this today. And at the time, everything was great, right? There's money flowing in, all the CMOs, all the chief marketing officers, that world that you're from, all those tech companies, that world that you're from, we got tons of money to spend. And we're spending it on PR, we're spending it on ad, we're spending on design. And now all of a sudden it's, oh, never mind. All we're looking at is inflation, a recession, rates that are going higher, VCs talking to their investments about, let's be careful with how you spend money. So what have the last couple of months been like for you? We'll start with, let's just say from the new business point of view, and then we'll get into the other angles. What are you seeing from people not wanting to write checks right now?
Well, at this point, we're not seeing a slowdown. So we're not seeing that slowdown. I think what we're seeing is a lot of talk and a lot of discussion around what's happening with the economy. We're seeing people trying to anticipate the future, and we're doing a lot of work with our clients to anticipate what's going to happen. I think it's such an interesting time because I've been reading so many different things as I think about what's important to our clients and what's important to us as a business. How do we think about the future? Here's what we're seeing right now is we're seeing, and knock on wood on this, but because you never know, but we're seeing steady flow of work coming in, and it is in some ways like the pandemic, where people are trying to anticipate the future, thinking about what they need to go, where they need to go, and how they're going to get there. So that's kind of on the client side. And then on our people's side, because, you know, a big part of potential recession, you start to get into issues around jobs. And certainly, I mean, this year and the last couple of years has been fascinating, because we've had sort of that great resignation happening. And what I'm seeing is it's still really tough to find talent. So, you know, the talent market is still at a point where, you know, it basically everyone's got a job that wants a job. So from an economy perspective, and when you think about our clients and where we're going, it's a really interesting time, because we're not into a recession, you know, and things I've read, it's like we're 50-50, you know, potential of going into a recession. I've also heard, you know, people talk about stagflation and different things. So where we're going to be 6 months from now, I'm not quite sure. But in terms of right this minute, things are ticking along, and part of what we're really focused on is that anticipation on where are we going to be.
How much is the media narrative actually making things worse? Every time you open up the newspaper, they talk about a recession, right? And like you're saying, you're not seeing business dry up yet. But the more that CMOs, head of comms, CFOs, CEOs, the more that they read these things, I wonder how much it will make them think, well, maybe we should stop spending money too, because everyone else seems to be concerned.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's always a potential. I think there's a couple of things. I think you've got supply chain issues, which are going to be an issue. I think we've got inflation, which is already an issue. And then I think what you're going to see is, as things like supply chain and inflation hit different businesses and various clients that we have, I think one of the things that you're going to see, I mean, who knows how much we'll see, you know, people cutting budgets and things, but I think it's more of a refocusing. So to me, it's more of this, and I read a really interesting article recently that was, you know, that this is more of a reset than a recession. And I do think that's kind of what's happening right now. It feels like more of a recalibration, a little bit of a reset. So I think there will be that focus on budgets and making sure that people are spending where they need to spend, and looking, you know, across their spends to make sure that it's focused in the right places. But that's kind of what I see, you know, for the future right now.
You mentioned the talent shortage right now. We all know that. Unemployment rate, basically zero. Anybody that wants a job has a job. Inflation means you got to keep spending more. How are you personally in your company dealing with that? You must be getting a lot of people saying to you, hey, I'm getting an offer 20% more. I can go across the street and work over there. I can stay at home and not go anywhere and just work for a different company for 20% more. How are you deciding when to try to fight for them, when to spend more, when to let them go? Say, okay, yeah, you got an offer, go for it, but I need to keep client retention. You're in a very difficult game if you start losing people, but if you pay them too much, then you're not making money on clients. So how do you balance that right now?
So it's such an interesting thing, because I mean, in so many ways, I understand a lot of the motives behind the Great Resignation. You know, people are looking at their lives. The pandemic happened. They're looking at their lives and they're figuring out what's important to them. And I actually think that's a really important thing for people to do. I think the more you understand why you are where you are and understand that is where you want to be, the more productive you are, the more, you know, positive and constructive you are. So I actually want people to go through that sort of process of thinking through that. We've found a couple of really interesting things with the Great Resignation. I mean, listen, it's hit us the way it's hit everyone else. But when we looked at the numbers, our sort of turnover rate was no different than it was in 2019. So we didn't actually see a huge bump last year.
Interesting. That's
the
really
way some companies did. Yeah. And, you know, there are I have thoughts on why that is.
I was going to say, why? Why did it not change? Because I think that's rare that your turnover was unchanged.
Yeah, I think that we have, I think any company that focuses just on salaries, if you focus just on the money, it's very transactional, and you have to have a deeper relationship with your people. You have to have friends at work. You have to have a community. I do think we're quite lucky. We've got a great culture here. We've got a really good community. I think a lot of us like working together. We like the people we work with. And I think that makes a huge difference in these moments of change, of sort of making you grounded and saying, yeah, I actually want to be here. I enjoy it. So that's just a theory, a working theory. But I do think there is a lot to be said for having a community, having a strong culture, working somewhere where your friends are. I think all of that is critically important.
That's a good point. I didn't think about it as explicitly as you mentioned, right? If it's only about numbers, then that's too transactional. There's nothing you can do, right? It's like someone will just move for an extra dollar. But if you have some inertia built in, or family, some culture, then it's not about the extra 10%, right? People, it's a deeper meaning for why they're working each day.
Yeah. And I think, there's two other interesting things I should say that we saw, which is, I think we saw people who joined us during the pandemic when we couldn't all be in person. Some of them, we did see some of them turn over, and that's because they didn't get a chance to get rooted with us in the same way. And so that's been really good for us to think about in terms of, orientation and what are we doing with our people to help them understand who we are and how we operate when we can't all be together. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I think is just literally, as I look at this year, and look at sort of where we're going, we have such this amazing talent and group of people. And I don't think we're alone as an agency for doing that. I think, for all of us, our people, our talent are everything, and so you've got to really value them. And so when something like a Great Resignation happens, we're not going to go out and just be the highest bidder, because either if we're going to do that, then we've got to raise everyone's salaries, right? So I think part of what we've got to do is think through, who are we as a company? What are our values? What do we believe in? And when you're so rooted in something like talent and decency and equal measure, that really helps you in these moments of change. Say, okay, we understand money is important, but it is not the only factor. And that's not going to be how we recruit our people. We're going to recruit our people based on who we are and them wanting to come in and be a part of this team and do some of the amazing work that we're doing.
I like that. So talk about the differences between the Canadian market and the US market. How is the game either unified? Like, are there companies that are just, they use you and they operate in both countries, or they say, okay, I have you for my Canadian work, I have an American firm for American work? That cross-national work, is it pretty separated? Is it combined? And what is the marketplace? How does it differ in Canada?
There's a lot of questions.
That's a lot of questions. Pick one of them, and then we'll go to the rest of them.
So the first thing I'd say, so yes, we have clients who are just in Canada. We are one of the largest Canadian owned and operated agencies. So we have a lot of Canadian-based clients who are operating just in this market, but equally, we have clients who are North American and work across the border. And that's an important thing. And we have that ability to sort of work across borders, and we do that. I think what makes working with a Canadian agency interesting, there's a few things. First of all, if you start sort of at that 10,000 foot range, Toronto is this really interesting microcosm. So not to go all Toronto centric, because there's Canada, which is amazing, but within Toronto, which is where we are, Toronto's a pretty amazing city. It is a city full of tech expertise, full of so much diversity in so many ways. It's a real microcosm of a city. It's also, I think, the fourth largest city in North America. So it's quite a big city. It's quite a diverse city, and there's exceptional talent in this city. So if you are looking across North America, an agency situated in Toronto, in the fourth largest city in North America, isn't a bad place to be. I also think Toronto is a real interesting, because it is this microcosm, it's an interesting pilot place, and Toronto and Canada, because we are quite advanced. And I think there's an opportunity for clients to test things out, either in the Toronto market or in Canadian markets, because it kind of is a microcosm for the world. And often you get a lot of really interesting insights from Toronto. So that's at the sort of 10,000 foot level. I also think that Canada being a smaller market, a lot of agencies, I mean, we know agencies have gone through massive disruption and are going to continue going through disruption in terms of what agencies do. And in Toronto being a smaller, or sort of the Canadian market being smaller, often we see smaller budgets here. So a lot of that disruption in many ways has happened. And I'll use PR as an example. The pool of media has really shrunk in the last 10 to 15 years. And it's not just shrunk, it's evolved and changed. So where you used to have people going to just be straight journalists, a lot of them are now influencers / journalists. They're creators / influencers / journalists. So you see a lot of multi-hyphenates happening in the PR world. And what's happened from a PR perspective is pure play media relations doesn't always work because it's such a small pool. And so you find media relations and social strategies are deeply entrenched in Canadian agencies because they have to be to survive. And so that's one place where disruption has happened very early on. And so you tend to see more integrated and holistic thinking, which I think is a huge advantage. The last thing I'll say is just the currency. You know, I think $1 Canadian dollar is 79 cents in American dollars, or about that. So, you know, there's also some cost efficiencies that come with Canadian agencies.
What do you mean by the cost efficiencies? Doesn't it all just even out in the end? Isn't it like, okay, if it's $1 there is 80 cents here, is it that the nominal rate ends up being the same sometimes? So it ends up just costing you less to spend it in Canadian dollars?
It can. It depends. It depends on what you're looking for. It depends on the situation. I mean, currency, you can get a currency exchange advantage there. So it's right. Just something to consider. I would never choose an agency based on currency. Yeah, no. it's another thing to think about.
It's come up. So you're saying it has come up in conversation with clients. Like it's been a topic that they consider.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's never something that is the deciding factor. I don't think I've ever seen it be the deciding factor, but it's one of those nice advantages. You know, often we will have a client say, why would, you know, we've got a local San Francisco firm, or we've got, you know, our choice of local San Francisco firms. Why would we choose you over them? And there's you know, we've got this depth of technology and different things that are the reasons why you would choose us. But then the currency piece is just it's like the cherry on top.
That is fine. Think about because I was an old trader back in the day in my hedge fund days. So we did a lot of currency trading, but I never thought it would apply to PR agencies across the border. That's a good one. So how does your time get split right now? Because you mentioned it's a smaller market in terms of the media relations opportunities in Canada. It's just not as widespread as in America. Everyone sort of knows everybody, is my guess. The client base, you know, there's just, you know, it's a smaller population, right, than America. So how much of your time is spent on bringing in new business versus managing the clients that you have in-house versus, you know, just managing your employees as the manager of the company? How would you split those three? Because a lot of times we always hear, hey, the big guns come in to pitch the business, and then somebody junior starts doing the work. You've been on all sides of this throughout your career. So how do you balance that personally?
So I tend to think of it as a bit of a 30-30-30 split. That's how I tend to think. But again, that's just sort of a basic view of it. And when I say 30-30-30, what I mean is 30% goes just to our people, the business, everything that is included. When you say operations, it almost makes it sound administrative. But to be honest, we are a people business. So it is all about, my job is to get rid of barriers that are in the way of our people doing what they do. And so I'd say 30% of my world is just getting rid of barriers, understanding, like talking to our people, understanding what's working for them, what's not working for them. And when there are those little pain points, figuring out, okay, how can we get rid of that? How can we make that an easier world for our people? So that's 30%. 30% would be clients. I'm pretty actively involved with many of our clients. I like to be actively involved with clients. I've got sort of a mantra of think like a CMO that I want our people to follow, and I think that's important. I think you teach by doing in many cases. So and I like to be close and actively involved. We do have 3 managing directors. We have a managing director for each business. So for Ben, Summon, Burn, One Method, and Narrative. And so those managing directors are actively involved with their clients as well. And that makes it kind of nice for me, because it means that I get to go in and work with specific clients on specific projects, in specific situations where they may need certain type of counsel. So that would be my client work. And then the last 30% is sort of a mix of new business and financials and that sort of thing. And your comment around, the big guns come in to pitch the business, that I personally I can't get into that. And so we don't run that way, because I want our people to understand how to do it. So we believe in casting, and as a new business opportunity comes in, we talk with that client to understand what they're looking for and their scope. And then we cast a team based on what makes sense for them. And, these days, it's kind of an interesting thing, because I think clients got wise, and rightly so, to that whole view of the big guns come in and then I never see them again. So what I find is it's way better. They want to see who are the people who are actually going to be working on my business. And I also think that's way better career development for our people. I want our people out there learning all the time. One thing that I've been thinking about is, what am I politely pushy about? And one thing I'm politely pushy about is learning. I love to learn, and I believe in lifelong learning. So I think new business is that opportunity for our people to get out there and pitch. So I'm a part of it. I want people to know who I am, but I'm not sort of the central focus of it.
You mentioned lifelong learning. What are you personally learning right now? Any books, any new skills you're working on, activities? What are you learning?
So that's a great question. I am a massive reader. That's kind of my jam, is just reading all the time. My team here will make jokes about Harvard Business Review, because that is one of my go-tos. I absolutely love it. But seriously, I learn about anything and everything. I think in the last, sort of since I became not just CEO, but when I became managing director, I really started to learn about business. I hadn't thought of myself as a business person before that. I'd thought of myself as a PR expert or as a marketing expert. And so, it's funny how as you learn, you start to define yourself in different ways. So certainly business has been an area where I have gone deep. Interestingly, I continue to learn about writing. The more you read, I think the more you naturally learn about writing and how to communicate in really compelling ways. And that's something that I will always be passionate about. So those are 2 areas certainly that I'm reading a lot about. The last thing I'll say, there was one article I read recently, and it was from The Atlantic. It was all about cancel culture. I can send it to you afterwards. But it was all about the importance of specificity. First of all, I love that word. And secondly, it's such an interesting article, and it is important. And it's funny. I find there are these random articles where you pick something up and it influences your thinking in so many different ways. So certainly the importance of specificity is something that I recently read about, and I'm digging that right now.
You're digging that. talk about the relationship between clients and agencies. How do you work together? Is it different than in the States? Sometimes it can be, in some places, it can be very combative, right? It's not necessarily a partnership. How do you feel that that works there in Canada?
I don't know that it works. So first of all, I don't find it combative. I don't find the combative works. That's my honest. I think as soon as things get really combative, you can lose the fact that there's good intent, on either side. So for me, I mean, it was funny as I was thinking about what are the things am I politely pushy about. The other thing is that everything's personal, and I think in this world where we're rushing, sometimes we don't spend enough time to communicate. So to answer your question on client relationships, my focus is almost, you can't communicate enough. And I want them to be a partnership. I don't think we can do our job if we cannot understand what our clients are going through and what they need from us. And so really, really going deep and understanding, where our clients are coming from, what they're thinking about, what pressures they have on them, what they're looking forward at and stressing about. All of those things I think are really, really important for us to be thinking about. And the only way we get that way is if we're constantly communicating with them, not in an annoying way. I don't want to suggest that, but in a way that is very much, I want to be sitting in a car with them. I want to have those moments where I can really understand what they're thinking about so that we can truly be their partner.
How do you prove the ROI for companies in Canada, especially because there are fewer media relations needs, right? It's a pretty integrated, consolidated media sphere. My guess is a lot of firms, a lot of brands think, I can just do this directly. I can hire a person, we'll reach out, we'll do the media relations. There's not that many outlets that we can't do it ourselves. How do you prove to them the value of the ROI by going through the agency model?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of different ways, to be honest. And again, this is where you need to understand your client, really understand their priorities and what's important to them so that you actually can deliver the ROI. We have clients who, outsource everything to us. We have a few clients who have in-house agencies, and we are an extension of their agency, an extension of that service. I mean, we here have an in-house studio. We have production, full service production facilities. So we've got a lot of different services that we can offer clients. PR is absolutely a big one. But there are a lot of holistic services and also services that you can package out for the clients. So you can't determine ROI unless you understand your client. One book, Measure What Matters. That book has been hugely influential on me. And I do think it's critically important. You have to focus and understand what matters for your clients. And then you can start to get into all kinds of really interesting measurement. Everything that there are things that we look at that we start to understand how that drives their consideration. We start to understand, and I don't want to get into the whole marketing funnel because there's lots of discussion and debate about whether
that'll be our next podcast is the marketing funnel.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just the fact that ROI is something that there's loads of things. What I love about today versus say 25 or 30 years ago, there's so many more things you can measure. It's just understanding what matters.
Measure what matters. I like it. Very, very, this has been great. So I really appreciate the time. Eye-opening conversation. Thanks so much. The Canadian politeness really shows through here, especially when talking to an American. So thank you for the time today. Should be an interesting summer. The rest of the year should be very fascinating with what really happens here with inflation, the labor shortage, CMO spends. I almost want to check in with you sort of Christmas time. See, okay, let's see how this all played out.
Yeah, I'd love it. It'd be great.
Awesome. All right. Have a good day, Sarah. I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.